días. Perdón, es la primera vez que hacemos un evento híbrido. Sorry, first time to this event. So it's a bit of chaos right now. First of all, queremos dar inicio con el seminario Financiamiento, Productividad y Distribución del Ingreso. Yo me quiero por favor limitar a agradecer la presencia en primera instancia al profesor Toporowski. Quisiera también dar la bienvenida a Gabriel Palma, que está de manera remota, no sé si lo podemos ver. Jesús, no sé si nos puede mostrar. También tenemos al profesor José Romero del CIDE, al profesor Rodrigo Elizabeth. Ya te me perdí.
No, ahí está el nombre.
La doctora Paloma Sánchez de la UNAM, el secretario general de la Facultad de Economía, Adriana Escamilla. Aquí está Jorge, no ocupo la mesa o no quiere saber. En este contexto ustedes se darán cuenta que este evento está patrocinado por la Facultad de Economía por el proyecto Crisis y Reestructuración en América Latina, Financiamiento y Productividad de Deuda del periodo post-pandemia, así como el Departamento de la UNAM-Azcapotzalco. Si pueden mostrar a Gabriel. Y la División de Estudios de Desarrollo del CIDE. Quiero decir dos palabras por qué nos importa tanto esta discusión. Queremos ver financiamiento, productividad y desarrollo. Históricamente, nuestras economías, aunque tuvieron una industrialización, nunca tuvieron un crecimiento endógeno y dinámico. Y ahí hay un problema de inversión, que creo que lo va a tocar el profesor Toporowski. Hoy día esta discusión es de suma relevancia, porque justamente se quiere tratar de reindustrializar el país. En ese contexto, esta discusión nos cae como anillo al dedo y la deberíamos difundir para ver si le entramos a la discusión. Permítanme nada más traducir lo que acabo de decir. I think the discussion today is extremely important because today Mexico is trying to reindustrialize again. And historically, we have never been able to get an endogenous and dynamic rate of growth because we haven't got investment with innovation. Perhaps I'm sure you will talk about that today. En este contexto, yo soy la que tengo que hablar mucho hoy día. Le dejo la palabra al doctor Escamilla para que a nombre de la facultad dé la bienvenida a este acto.
Muchas gracias, doctora Gabriel. Buenos días a todas, todos, todes. Primero que nada, es un verdadero honor, un placer estar aquí con ustedes esta mañana, inaugurando este importante evento. Quiero darle, primero agradecer a la doctora Ana Levi, a todo su equipo de trabajo, Paloma, Jorge, Humberto, todos los colegas que trabajan con ella, trabajando estos temas tan importantes. Una felicitación por su esfuerzo, un honor para la Facultad de Economía que se estén presentando estos eventos de primerísimo nivel. La directora, la maestra Lorena Rodríguez, no pudo asistir por un tema de agenda. Ahorita mismo está en la FILUNI inaugurando la feria, pero lo mismo me transmite estas felicitaciones y este agradecimiento. También quiero dar la bienvenida al profesor Toporowski. Es un placer que nos acompañe. Ya es un asiduo visitante a la universidad. Yo creo que ya hay que ofrecerle yo iba a decir la nacionalidad.
Is a full-time job or national?
Pero igual. Pero aún así es un gusto verlo, compartir con usted. Muchas gracias por estar aquí fortaleciendo estas discusiones que estamos teniendo desde América Latina. También es un honor y una alegría compartir aquí mesa con mi amigo José Antonio Romero TVH, el director general del CIDE. a quien también le damos la más cordial bienvenida. Es una mesa muy, muy bonita, que suma esfuerzos interinstitucionales, equipos de trabajo muy dinámicos que además vienen desde hace años laborando juntos, haciendo conocimiento de frontera, y pues eso es motivo de orgullo para la Facultad de Economía. Solamente quiero decir esto y remarcar, como señala la doctora Levy, pues que la vinculación entre estos temas, entre lo productivo y lo financiero, se dice fácil, pero la verdad es que está en la frontera del conocimiento, más ahora que los flujos financieros se han complejizado tanto, que han aparecido nuevos actores institucionales y sobre todo no institucionales, analizar su relación con lo productivo, que también se ha complejizado muchísimo, y eso lo podemos ver a través del enfoque de las redes globales de producción, pues es una tarea titánica, vincular estos dos esfuerzos, estas dos dinámicas, y se antoja bastante interesante las actividades. También saludo al profesor Palma, que está siguiéndonos, es un honor que esté con nosotros de manera virtual. Y pues nada, solamente desear el mejor de los éxitos al evento, decirles a todas y todos ustedes que es un orgullo que la Facultad de Economía esté tocando estos temas, y como usted sabe, doctora Levy, pues cuenta con todo el apoyo de esta administración para seguir impulsando estas agendas de investigación y estos equipos y esfuerzos interinstitucionales. Sin más, pues muchísimas gracias y adelante, pues vamos con el evento. No me he preparado.
Ah, sí, sí.
Bueno, es un honor estar aquí con ustedes en la inauguración de este curso sobre financiamiento, productividad y distribución del ingreso, organizado en colaboración por el CIDE, la Facultad de Economía y la UNAM. Este evento representa un esfuerzo conjunto de nuestras instituciones y subraya nuestro firme compromiso con la comprensión profunda y el análisis riguroso de los desafíos económicos que estamos enfrentando hoy en día. Nos encontramos en una coyuntura crítica dentro de la historia económica, tanto de América Latina como del mundo en general. Las dinámicas cambiantes de la globalización, los ciclos económicos recurrentes y las crecientes desigualdades sociales y económicas han resaltado la imperiosa necesidad de reexaminar y repensar nuestras estrategias de desarrollo. El contexto post-pandemia nos ha brindado importantes lecciones sobre la resiliencia y la vulnerabilidad de nuestras economías, y ha puesto de relieve la urgencia de abordar problemas estructurales que han permanecido sin resolver durante demasiado tiempo. Este curso, que se desarrollará en las próximas semanas, abordará cuestiones de vital importancia y relevancia contemporánea. Contaremos con la valiosa participación de dos renombrados académicos internacionales, el señor Toporowski, de la Universidad de Londres, y el doctor José Gabriel Palma, de la Universidad de Cambridge y la Universidad de Santiago de Chile. Ellos nos ofrecerán una perspectiva crítica y bien fundamentada sobre la productividad laboral en el marco de los ciclos económicos, y explorarán la compleja relación entre financiamiento, liquidez y desigualdad en América Latina y otras economías emergentes. El profesor Toporowski nos guiará a través de un análisis minucioso sobre cómo la productividad laboral se ve influenciada por las fluctuaciones del ciclo económico y de qué manera estas dinámicas afectan la distribución del ingreso en los mercados emergentes. Por otro lado, el profesor Palma nos invitará a reflexionar sobre las razones detrás del pobre desempeño de América Latina en términos de crecimiento de la productividad desde la implementación de las reformas neoliberales. Este análisis es crucial para entender no solo las fallas del pasado, sino también para diseñar políticas más efectivas y justas para el futuro. Este curso no solo es una oportunidad única para aprender de expertos que se encuentran a la vanguardia del análisis económico global y regional, sino también un espacio propicio para el debate y la reflexión sobre las implicaciones de sus ideas en el contexto particular de nuestras realidades locales. Espero que este evento enriquezca sus conocimientos y les proporcione y nos proporcione nuevas perspectivas que puedan aplicar en sus respectivas áreas de trabajo e investigación. Finalmente, quisiera expresar mi sincero agradecimiento a todos los organizadores y coordinadores que han trabajado incansablemente para hacer posible este evento. A todos los participantes les animo a aprovechar al máximo esta experiencia única. Estoy convencido de que las discusiones que se generarán aquí no solo ampliarán su comprensión de los temas tratados, sino que también contribuirán a su desarrollo profesional y académico. Muchísimas gracias.
Quisiera preguntarle a la doctora Paloma Sánchez si quisiera algunas palabras.
Buenos días a todas, a todos, a todes que nos acompañan tanto de manera presencial como a distancia. Yo nada más de una manera muy breve les agradezco su presencia. Los invito también a acompañarlos en la UNAM-Azcapotzalco, en el Departamento de Economía. Tendremos la tercera sesión de este primer grupo de conferencias. Estará el doctor Toporowski de manera presencial el siguiente jueves. Y bueno, también a todos los invito a que nos visiten a la UAM. De hecho, el día de mañana vamos a compartir las redes sociales, tanto en Facebook como en YouTube Live, para que puedan seguir el evento en caso de que no puedan acompañarnos. Es una gran oportunidad para nosotros estar aquí. Esperemos que todos estos tipos de conferencias sean fructíferos para todas y para todos. Agradecemos a la Facultad de Economía, agradecemos al CIDE, ¿no?, la posibilidad de colaborar juntos. Professor Toporowski, it's a pleasure to have you with us. We hope you enjoy your stay and we look forward to seeing you next Thursday at UNAM-Azcapotzalco. Muchas gracias.
Agradezco que tendría a Jorge, corresponsable de este proyecto, si nos hace un poco el favor de decirnos cuáles van a ser las reglas del juego con preguntas y demás.
First of all, I want to say thank you, Professor Toporowski, for being here. It's a pleasure that you stay here with us again. For the people on the room, I want to say that, as you know, the session is going to be in English, and I'm going to say a little bit things about this session. You know, after the presentation, we are going to have a little bit of discussion and time for questions. And I suggest you that you can leave your question on chat, and we can pass it to the Professor Toporowski after the presentation. I want to say that the third session is going to be is going to take place at UNAM-Azcapotzalco en Sala Tlatelolco.
Tecnológica.
In Sala Multitecnológica on Thursday. Okay. I'm going to speak Spanish. Estoy agradeciendo al profesor Toporowski por estar aquí con nosotros. Les recuerdo que en la sesión, después de la presentación del profesor Toporowski, vamos a tener tiempo para hacer preguntas y respuestas. La sesión del jueves va a tener lugar en la UNAM-Azcapotzalco y la van a poder seguir a través de la página de Facebook y YouTube, ¿no? Entonces, without more hesitation, I'm going to give the word to Professor Toporowski.
Yo creo que en el ánimo de venir a escuchar a lo que vinimos, le dejamos the floor, microphone. Doctor Toporowski.
Bueno, doctor, también hay que agradecer. Está la doctora Erika Arias, secretaria de la Facultad, está en el Zoom.
Perdón, doctora Arias, también le damos la bienvenida. No estoy viendo quién está en el Zoom. También al doctor Gabriel Palma, que todavía no lo podemos encontrar en la lista. Pero ahorita ya le pedí, ahorita vamos a resolver esos problemas. Por de pronto, agradezco a todo el mundo en esta mesa y... Nos vamos para abajo para que se vea.
How leaving?
Tampoco puedo- Omar.
Es una broma.
Okay, thank you very much for the warm introduction. I want in particular to thank Naomi Levy for her for her kind invitation to me, the faculty of UNAM, for the Faculty of Economics at UNAM, for their kindness in inviting me to give these lectures, to contribute to this very important work project that you have in Mexico of reindustrialization. I hope some of what I say can be helpful. I would like to thank Professor Romero Telache for also contributing to this invitation and to the program of lectures that I will give. It's a particular honor to have in this program, along with me, Dr. Gabriel Palma from Cambridge, whose work I'm familiar with and I have admired. So let me start off with my lectures, with my first lecture on finance productivity and the distribution of income. I come here really as an expert on the work of Michael Kalecki on his macroeconomics, and part of that was his dedication to the industrialization of the developing countries. And I think it's here that his work is of particular relevance to Mexico as you reindustrialize, because Mexico was industrialized. Mexico was industrialized before the curse of the oil boom, and Mexico will, I believe, move on after the oil boom. And I will present some of the reasons why this is necessary for Mexico. I'm going to, I'll be giving 3 lectures. One is on labor productivity and the business cycle. This is my lecture today. Secondly, tomorrow's lecture will be on labor productivity in developing countries and emerging markets. And here I will bring in some of those aspects which are of finance, which I think are missing in a lot of the approaches to development economics that we find. And then in my final lecture, finance, liquidity, and labor productivity, I will go more deeply into these issues of finance and how finance will affect labor productivity. So let me start with my first lecture, a brief summary. I always give a summary at the beginning because I would like. I don't like lectures where the conclusion is a surprise. What's the surprise? There may be a surprise, but you should know in which direction it is going. I'll give a general introduction to the issue of labour productivity. Then I wanted to give an analysis of how productivity is linked to the distribution of income. I think a key feature, which I think is missing in much of the recent discussion of labour productivity, where people talk on and on and on about how important labour productivity is, but don't see the connection between that and the distribution of income. I'll say something about the sources of productivity, and then finally, conclude around the general issue of productivity over the business cycle. I would say that in these lectures, I'm not going to use very much data. These lectures are theoretical rather than data-driven. I assume that the data is known. It's largely known. I think what is missing is how we understand this data, the concepts that we use in order to understand this data. And that's this is my main concern in these lectures. Okay, let me start off with what is productivity? The classical and the neoclassical view is that productivity is the output that is due to the effort or the skill of labour. In classical economics, from Adam Smith onwards, it was always it was labour that provided this additional output of labour, of a given unit of labour. They were added to this was capital, capital in the sense of the equipment that the worker has to hand, that in Adam Smith's famous view, the workers, the division of labour allowed the worker to use machinery which would improve the productivity of labour. Robert Solow introduced this concept that of technology as being the outcome of anything other than the capital and labour input. I want to argue that this is correct in an economy that's organised as one factory. If you think about the way in which Adam Smith thought of thought of productivity and the division of labour, it was yes, in part the division of labour within one factory, but it was presumed what would have the effects would still be the same. The effects on productivity would still be the same if you looked at the economy as a whole. The economy organised as one factory. This is what Keynes, in one of his early drafts of the general theory, referred to as a cooperative economy, the Walrasian kind of economy, where which is organised to maximise productivity, and in particular to maximise the surplus that is the purpose, is the function of economic activity, according to David Ricardo and of course and his successor. Thank you. And his,
Don't worry, we have.
okay. And his successors, including Marx. This I want to highlight is not correct in a money economy where income depends on expenditure. Or let me put it differently, because I don't want to argue that the difference is made because we have money. This is a very common misunderstanding among monetary economies. The situation is more complex because the distribution of income comes into the analysis, in particular the distribution between profits and wages. But money adds its complications, and this is what I will be showing next. Good.
You're speaking to the machine.
Okay. We now I have some assistance with mine.
Isili Thailand. It's new technology. Do you want me open another computer or you to have it?
No, I'm very happy looking at this.
Sorry.
You can look behind me, I can look here. Here we are. Thank you. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Productivity and the distribution of income. Let me start off with the very basic, right at the very basics of all this, in the equality between aggregate supply, in other words, total income that's derived from aggregate supply, and aggregate demand, demand being a effective demand, that it's the total expenditure in a given period. So that in a given period, total income, and I use these abbreviations. Total income Y is equal to total consumption C plus capital formation or investment, which is abbreviated as I, government expenditure minus taxation, fiscal deficit, in other words, G minus T, plus exports minus imports. This is the trade balance. So that we have the famous national income expenditure of Y equals C plus I plus G minus T plus X minus N. In other words, it's equal to consumption plus investment plus the fiscal deficit plus the trade surplus. One can think of this in terms of aggregates, and this is how you are taught to understand this when you do introductory macroeconomics. I actually want to do something more than this and ask you to understand this as money flows between expenditure and income. We have two classes in this economy, capitalists who receive profits or P, and workers earning wages, WL. W for the wage rate, L is for the amount of labor that's applied in the economy. So if we take national income minus wage income, the rest is profits. So if we assume that workers consume all their income, which is a reasonable assumption, I think we can set consumption as equal to the wage income, WL, plus capitalist consumption, which is CC in this case. So if we take that and substitute it into the first equation, there we have the total income minus wage income is equal to profits, is equal to investment plus capitalist consumption, plus the fiscal deficit, G minus T, plus the trade surplus, X minus N. And this is Kalecki's profits equation. I was going to say Kalecki's famous profits equation. It was famous in the 1950s. And I think it's still, I guess, yes, still here at UNAM is still famous.
Roses.
Yes, thank you. Okay. If we divide through by the total cost of labor, so you divide total national income by wage income, minus 1 is equal to profits over the divided by wage income. Okay, so this is here what we've done is effectively got an equation for labor productivity. So profits divided by the wage rate is the same as that profits equation, each item divided by WL. So investment divided by wage income, capitalist consumption divided by wage income, the fiscal deficit divided by wage income, and trade, so the trade surplus divided by wage income. So in effect, we have an equation for labor productivity. And I think this is the critical point in my analysis. I'm arguing here that labor productivity is equal to 1 plus the ratio of profits to wage income. And this I think is my, this is the fundamental element. I take this as an equation for labor productivity because, but this is labor productivity in money terms. It's not labor productivity per hour of labor or per working day. There is plenty of data for. The problem with it is that this kind of labor productivity in hourly labor terms has no meaning in a money economy. What has meaning in a money economy is the amount of surplus money that is generated by the worker. In other words, the amount of income in addition to the worker's own remuneration, to the worker's own wage income that the worker creates. Okay. If we look at this, the way in which labor productivity is traditionally viewed, as real capital is viewed is a factor, clearly a factor in this in labor productivity. It's measured usually in real terms. Very often in endogenous growth theory, or one adds to this human or social capital. More recently, as economists have become more environmentally aware, we add to this the natural capital, the natural capital that is being depleted as with carbon emissions or with the use of limited mineral resources. I would say that this capital as a source of productivity has two disadvantages for analytical purposes. First of all, these types of capital are difficult to measure. I refer you to the Cambridge capital controversies. The Cambridge capital controversies, which were essentially around the issue of whether whether you can measure these types of capital independently of the income that they generate. If you cannot measure them independently of that income, then you cannot logically argue that they are the cause of that income, because you've actually introduced that cause in the first place, a circular argument. This is a complex case. If you're interested in following this up, then Joan Robinson writes on this, but in particular, my old friend Jeffrey Harcourt, who died a couple of years ago. This was his famous intervention in economic theory. So, as I say, one disadvantage of these concepts of capital is that they offer is that they're difficult to measure. But the second disadvantage of them is that they offer only potential productivity. They don't tell you whether this productivity is realized. You can have a very good machine in your factory, but if that machine isn't being used, then there is no productivity gain from having that machine. So how do you measure, or how do you get actual productivity? How do you measure this? Well, in a market economy, it has to be realized with monetary circulation. This is productivity in a market economy as opposed to a Robinson Crusoe economy. The Robinson Crusoe economy is what Keynes called the cooperative economy, the Walras general equilibrium economy. But once you take into account monetary circulation, you are then taking into account payment of wages, secondly, the payment for investment and capitalist consumption. This is critical. And this is done between businesses. It's an inter-business payment. Payments in the government budget, government expenditure minus taxation, and payments for foreign trade. Where does the theory come from? Quite obviously, the first person who put this forward was Marx in his Schemes of Reproduction in Volume 2 of Capital, which leads on to Luxemburg was taken up by Rosa Luxemburg in her critique of Marx, and then it was taken up from Luxemburg by Kaletsky. There is another source of this, almost independent, although curiously, this is one of the rare points in Keynes's writing where he refers to Marx, and that is in Keynes's analysis of what he considered to be the opposite of a cooperative economy, what he called an entrepreneur economy. In his 1934 draft of the general theory, if you have the collected writings in your library, page 81 of volume 29. Volume 29, this volume containing manuscripts found in a laundry basket of Keynes's country house after his beloved wife, the ballerina Lydia Lopokova, had died around 1976, and they were clearing out the house, and they found this laundry basket with manuscripts. A curious thing, because the editor of the collected writings had finished the collected writings of Keynes, was working on the index, and they had to put out a separate volume containing all the items there. And actually, it's this one of the people that was consulted on the significance of these manuscripts was Victoria Chick, who and I suspect that it was this that brought her to her conclusion about the analysis of Keynes in the general theory. It wasn't that Keynes didn't use the wage unit as a concept of making aggregate variables into real units, i.e. non-money units. He used the term wage unit as the money that was paid in wages. In other words, what I did in the previous area, dividing everything by the wage rate times the quantity of labor. Okay, and then Kalecki, of course, I should mention, because Kalecki's analysis is all in money terms. Let's examine how this works over the business cycle. How the different terms, ICC, the fiscal surplus, fiscal deficit, and the trade surplus will work over the business cycle. Well, this is fairly well known. Investment is strongly pro-cyclical. Business investment rises in a boom and continues to rise in that boom. And then it is the leading indicator usually that investment, that the boom has finished and we're moving on to a recession. For the same reason, WL, wage income, is also pro-cyclical, maybe less so strongly pro-cyclical because it tends to lag a little bit, but certainly the amount of labor employed is pro-cyclical. Employment rises in the boom, and eventually so does the wage rate. Capitalist consumption, on the whole, is inelastic with respect to income or the wage rate. In general, capitalists, rich people, have as much money as they need. They can afford their consumption. They certainly do not consume up to their budget line, that famous budget line that you learn about in your in your introductory macroeconomics that you have a certain income, you spend all of it on consumption. The rich don't, because they just consume as much as they want. This was recognized by Keynes in his, but Keynes put it forward as a psychological regularity, that on the whole, as your income rises, consumption rises as well, but by a smaller and smaller proportion, to consume. Caldor's theory of distribution, which turns this capitalist propensity to consume as the important factor in economic dynamics, in economic growth. His argument essentially was that workers' savings have don't have any impact on growth or distribution. Let's take the other two difficult terms. G minus T, the fiscal deficit. This in general is counter-cyclical. It really depends on there's automatic fiscal stabilizers, the degree to which, for example, if the economy moves into a recession, then tax revenue tends to fall. Welfare expenditure rises, so the fiscal deficit will tend to rise in a recession. The fiscal deficit will tend to fall in a boom. Foreign trade and the business cycle, foreign trade over the business cycle. This again depends on the structure of the economy, and I'll go into this in a little bit more detail. This is it tends to be pro-cyclical for commodity exports. Pro-cyclical in the sense that if the rest of the world enters into an economic boom, the exports of any given country will tend to rise, whether they're commodity exports or manufacturing exports. But this is offset by rising imports in a commodity export boom. In other words, during an economic boom, there's a tendency for imports to rise. In particular, in countries which do not have a strong manufacturing base, and therefore, as national income rises, as expenditure rises, more and more manufactured goods are imported. The same thing actually doesn't apply so much to services, because services are on the whole are not traded very much. The services can be developed, the supply of services can be usually developed fairly easily and quickly in the domestic economy, or come through migration. The fiscal the trade surplus tends to move in a counter-cyclical way for manufacturing countries. And because of this import factor, import element, it was certainly the factor that undermined economic growth policies under the Bretton Woods system. The import counter-cyclicality tends to offset export pro-cyclicality, but then a lot of this depends on whether the country is a net exporter or a net importer. The key factor in the influence of all this on profits is investment. Investment is really by far the largest factor in the Kalecki profits equation. The other factors like the trade surplus or the fiscal deficit, they're balance items. They tend not to be very big, but investment or fixed capital formation, it tends to be it tends to have a strong effect on profits. However, the wage income is also pro-cyclical. So you find that both profits and wages are rising in the boom, and hence what's known as the wage share, the ratio of wage income to profits tends to be more or less stable. Counter-cyclical fiscal policy offsets the pro-cyclical wage rate. Sorry, no, it doesn't, because the pro-cyclical wage income is a denominator. The denominator foreign trade effect. The foreign trade effect really depends on the structure of foreign trade. What I'm really driving at is that it really does depend on the structure of the economy, and this is where the issue of whether a country is a developing country or not is important. If we come back to that original equation, the profits divided by wage income plus 1 is labor productivity. In other words, it's the amount of total income that's produced by one wage unit. If we look at neo-Kaleckian growth theory, there's been a fashion for this. I won't go into it. This is the theory advanced by Amit Bhadouri and Marglin from 1990. It attributes economic stagnation to wage suppression and a rising profit share. This is more recently, it's been it's come into controversy amongst economists under the concept of seller's inflation put forward by a number of American economists, US American economists, Isabella Weber in particular. The idea that we have that inflation is driven by employers or by capitalists raising prices in order to just obtain extra profits. I'm rather skeptical of this view, partly because I think Baduri and Marglin is a theory of the long run. It's not supposed to be, at least in the terms in which they put the theory, it's not supposed to be an explanation of the business side. It's not supposed to be an explanation of an absence of economic boom. The profit share in particular cannot be increased by capitalists or firms raising profit margins. This is a myth. What you do find is that certain large corporates can increase profits, but it's usually at the expense of firms selling wage goods. Okay. Let me give you an example. Large corporates, if we look at energy prices now, energy supply is dominated by large corporates. They have monopoly positions. They raise energy prices. The higher energy prices reduce real wages. Households with reduced wage income find that they can spend less. But what do they spend less on? They cannot spend less on energy. In general, they will spend less on discretionary expenditure, holidays, consumer durables. Who loses from that? Who loses from that are the firms, the smaller firms, which supply those goods. Retailers, smaller shops. If you, in fact, if you go back to the origins of this theory in Marx, Marx very clearly discusses the issue of is it possible for capitalists to increase their profits by raising the prices of wage goods, and he makes very clear that yes, certain capitalists can, but this is by redistributing profits from other capitalists. It's not by taking money from wage income may actually fall, but what's happening is that profits are not increasing; they're being redistributed. In general, and this leads on to the standard Keynesian argument that lower real wages are associated with lower investment, reducing profits. And this Keynes says in the general theory, if you allow prices to fall, if you force wages down, you're eventually going to force, in a competitive market, prices to fall. And if prices start falling, firms will stop investing. And then that's the factor that will cause the economy to move into a recession. So, in other words, if you have wages policy does come into the factor if consumption is equal to the wage income plus capitalist consumption, and we have a gross productivity is equal to the profit share plus 1. If the rate of change of wages is less than the rate of change of productivity, then effectively unemployment rises. Productivity is allowed to rise faster than the rate of change of wages, then goods are being produced using fewer, the same amount of goods are being produced using fewer and fewer workers. Why? Because more goods cannot be sold. More goods cannot be sold if real wages, if the real value of wages is falling. Okay, so the three deflationary processes of wage reduction are, first of all, if you have perfect competition, you were in a situation of perfect competition, prices will fall with falling wages. Firms will compete with each other to sell their goods. There's no fall in real wages, but the problem is the issue of debt. That if prices are falling, but debts are fixed in money terms, then you have debt deflation. And this is the other factor that will cause firms to stop investing, because they suddenly become aware that their revenue is falling relative to their debt. If in imperfect competition, prices will not fall, but wages fall, causing a reduction in real wages and consumption. Lower investment will, due to debt deflation and lower consumption, will reduce output and employment. Basically, I mean, this is what this is Keynes' the general theory. Am I finished? Yes. Yeah. Okay. So, sorry. my apologies. I do not have in front of me, but essentially we have this issue that labor productivity. My conclusion from this, labor productivity largely depends on capitalists' own expenditure on investment. If not capitalists invest in their own consumption, if not their own consumption and investment, then it depends on the fiscal deficit. And you go, okay.
That's it. But okay.
Thank you. Okay. If it's not their own investment and consumption, then it depends on the fiscal deficit.
Yeah.
And this is why Koletsky was an advocate of having a permanent fiscal deficit. And this is actually, he wasn't so committed, but you do need, this is a substitute for investment. If business won't invest enough, we need a fiscal deficit to substitute this. And then the factor that I will expand on in tomorrow's lecture and on Friday, which is the question of the foreign trade balance, because this is something which is in particular critical for developing countries, because developing countries do not have the large domestic economy that industrialized countries can rely on. So I'll finish there. If we do we have time for questions?
Yeah.
So let's, because
Well, thank you, Dr. Toporowski, for this marvelous presentation. I know that it's going to be useful for all of us. And
I hope it will appear in the examination.
no, please no. Okay. I think
we have two types of interventions. The one on the floor from here and the one from, we have about 90 people, I think, connected.
I don't know if Dr. Palma is want to add something.
Gabriel, ¿quiere preguntar algo?
Now it's allowed to
No,
make it.
no está con una pregunta.
No. It's José.
No por ahora, gracias.
Okay.
Ok, gracias. No sé si empecemos aquí en la sala. No sé si alguien. Creo que estamos tocando un papel fundamental acá. El problema en la inversión no solamente es en función de las ganancias, es decir, es en función de las ganancias realizadas. No es lo que voy a obtener, sino lo que efectivamente se vendió. Piensen en la política económica que se está llevando hoy día en los gobiernos. Tiene su lógica, la transparencia. Cedo la palabra. Roberto.
Hable a la gente del Zoom,
Sí,
a ver si.
También, empecemos, dije que empezamos.
No, que pasen sus preguntas.
Por favor, compañeros de Zoom, pasen sus preguntas. ¿Quién las está recolectando? Tú y...
Pues yo.
Bueno, las está colectando, bueno, está también Humberto. Pero Roberto, distinguido profesor de esta facultad, adelante.
Digo, profesor,
¿Quién usa el micrófono?
thank you, Professor, for your presentation. My question is this. There is many positions which say that low productivity is the reason why an economy like Mexico is stagnant. However, in your explanation, the income distribution, particularly because the wages are small, is another option. I don't know what do you say about this discussion between productivity versus income distribution as explanation about the explanation.
Can we make three questions? Is it okay with you? Or you want to answer straight away?
No,
I think
Adalberto.
we have another question.
Adalberto, si le pasa el micrófono, por favor.
Hello, Professor. First of all, thank you for being here. It was a marvelous presentation. And I would like to ask you, just for an example of how do you explain such a mechanism as the example that you made before with the monopolistic oil enterprises, in which in such an economy like the Mexican economy, the exchange rate can make an effect in these decisions of rising prices or lowering prices. Do you have some example for such a transmission mechanism? Thank you.
Arturo, ¿lo vas a preguntar?
La pregunta.
Pregúntale a Arturo, tiene que Yo le pregunto. Arturito, if you want, you can start. ¿Alguna persona más de aquí, los compañeros?
La pregunta.
Maestrantes, doctorantes, aprovechen.
Yeah. I think if you want to examine the issue of low productivity in Mexico, a vital paper on this, and a very old one, is from 1936 by Joan Robinson, called an article called Hidden Unemployment, where she looked at the issue of that's very familiar here in Mexico, but had become very familiar in Europe at the height of the Great Depression. In other words, in the absence of a proper system of welfare provision, what do people do? People go buy a box of cigarettes in a supermarket and then go out onto the street and sell them. In other words, from a situation of unemployment, the worker becomes what's sometimes referred to as a small businessman. And for certain Austrian Hayekian economists, this is a most wonderful sight because it shows the inherent entrepreneurship of the population. No, it doesn't. It shows that there isn't enough employment in the economy. And Joan Robinson explored this by saying that these are not small businesses. These are people who are doing a huge amount of work for very, very little return. In other words, very, very low productivity. And if you want to know the reason why productivity in countries like Mexico is extremely low, the reason for that is out on the street. It's that very often not even making a surplus. In the UK, I remember a few years ago a study of small businesses where it was shown that a lot of these businesses were actually they were family businesses, but they were operating at a loss. And we're all of us here we've studied economics, and we would ask ourselves, why would someone operate a business running at a loss? Well, for many poor people, it works because it provides employment for the family. It provides some kind of minimal cash flow. How is that loss covered? Well, it's covered by the fact that perhaps one member of the family has a proper job and pays the household bills, subsidizes the family business with their employment. So it's this that is the cause of low productivity in poorer countries, in countries where there's structural underemployment. I commend that article by Joan Robinson because she describes it as a type of hidden unemployment. These people should not be included. This kind of work should not be included in the employment figures. Incidentally, it was that article that was that Kaletsky read, and he then got in touch with Joan Robinson. He just arrived in London, got in touch with Joan Robinson, and that was the beginning of his collaboration with her and Hayes. On the exchange rate, as a factor in productivity. This the exchange rate actually has, I think, in the first instance, it has redistributional effects. Traditionally, if you look at the Balassa-Samuelson effect, this kind of the neoclassical literature, according to this, the exchange rate adjusts as an economy industrializes. The problem is that Samuelson looked at this in real terms. If you look at it in cash flow terms, then you can see that the adjustment doesn't happen, because as the exchange rate depreciates, certainly for developing countries, it means that exports may become more competitive, but imports become more expensive. And what you find is that there is additional income in the export sector, but it's counterbalanced, if not exceeded, by the cash flow loss in the import sector and in the domestic economy. The domestic economy now has to pay additional money. So the exchange rate is not a solution to the issue of productivity. In fact, if you look at China, look at Germany, the great exporting powerhouses, they are, how did they generate such high exports? They did it through investment, not through depreciation of the currency. So the exchange rate has more complex effects.
We have two more questions. The first one is from Salvador Alverde. In Mexico, we have had labor reforms such as outsourcing.
Yeah.
Do these types of policies directly affect the economic cycle? The first one. And the second one is, large private companies generate labor liabilities that are very large, due to which Mexican policy or Mexican policymakers have decided to create Afores, which are very large investment funds. This is the context. From your point of view, are these types of social benefits compromise or threaten the great global financialization, and are compromised by the great global financialization? This is the question.
Yeah, she's really talking about investment funds.
Yeah.
Afore is the one that recollects the savings
of the
workers for pension.
Pension funds. Okay.
For pension funds.
Yeah.
The problem is financialization is going to affect this kind of side of the work.
Yeah.
And perhaps we can add another question, can I?
Yeah.
There is a big discussion in Mexico what to do in this second phase of the government.
Yeah.
Continue with the policy of transferences to the poor, which increases their income. Actually, I think wages are more than double the minimum wages and also the manufacturer wages.
Yeah.
And invest to the point that it won't generate fiscal deficit. So there is a big issue because there is a group of people many from the university actually, that are trying out invest big firms to have economic growth. Yes, do some income tax distribution, which is a problem because big capital anyway are going to are very much against the government. So what it seems that in this next presidency, they will go along the same terms with a bit more of investment, it looks like. What would be your advice in this sense? How to continue just to try to increase the internal market and spend and have investment spending which not destabilizing the fiscal deficit, not stabilizing the fiscal
Yes,
We need to think about the more the taxing at the big firm, you know. This is a big problem in Mexico. In Latin America. All over the world.
Okay, first of all, the labor policies and wage rates. I think that this is yes, this is very important, but actually for not so much for its impact on the business cycle, because I don't think that it has that significant an impact on the business cycle, but it is important for social welfare purposes, so that people have dignity and safety at work, and that I think is important. The pension funds investing in green investment funds. This is something that bothers me because I think green policies should be focused on green projects. In other words, on the greening of the investment in making sure that production is not carbon emitting and that Mexico makes its contribution to the fight against climate change and global warming. There is a strong pressure, there's a strong lobby in favor of green finance and green investment, and why that bothers me for two reasons. Actually, I wrote a report on this recently. There are two flaws in this. One is that when firms issue bonds, they usually issue them for liquidity purposes and not for investment purposes. And this the theory behind this is assuming that if these bonds are issued, then the money will find its way to green projects. I don't think that this will happen. I actually think that what we have to be very, very careful of is the balance between the money that's being invested, that's being put up for investment in green projects, and the actual expenditures on green projects. What is the difference between them? The difference between them is, first of all, greenwashing, or projects which are in fact polluting, but which are made to appear as if they're green projects. And the second danger is the possibility of a green bubble, that people will buy green bonds because there is always going to be a residual buyer of last resort in the pension funds. And this would concern me in this. Finally, the question of transfers to the poor as opposed to investment. I'm as far as transfers to the poor are concerned, my worry is that certainly the trade unions in Britain have challenged ideas such as basic income or subsidies on the grounds that this is effectively a subsidy to bad employers, and one shouldn't do it. So, but this is different to, let's say, having a minimum wage, having a high minimum wage with which one goes along. I don't think that there is a conflict between transfers to the poor and investment. I think investment can also serve as helping to eliminate poverty. The goal should be to eliminate poverty and not to transfer a certain amount to poor people. And in particular, we should not neglect a third kind of expenditure, which is important, and that is in public services. It's possible to increase the real income of workers by providing decent hospitals, decent schooling, just as much as by raising their wages or giving them, in fact, more directly, because you are giving. If you give free public services, you're giving at the point of need.
We have 3 more questions in the chat. If we, I don't know if we have time for that.
Would you accept another 3 questions? You're telling.
Yes.
Gabriel, Palma. ¿Tienen hasta aquí, Humberto?
¿Alguien más?
Adelante, Humberto.
This model innovation has an important role in fact in the long run. But for example, in this context of dominance of large corporations, how can this situation can affect investment in productivity? To the fact that productivity is dependent on the own spending of capitalists. No? So the question is how this situation can affect productivity, and if there is I don't know a great difference between the analysis of Carlo and Kalexki in relation to productivity.
The second one is from Abraham Gonzalez. What do you think about, or what is your point of view about the discussion of the concept of capital in the discussion of Cambridge? The context of the discussion of Cambridge. And another one is how beneficial is nearshoring in Mexico for the distribution of workers' salary income if everything is already automated in production.
And Gabriel Palma sends his regards and asks, let me see what if there's the effect in all this of an increase in the degree of concentration.
Another one is how to incorporate labor rights into the economic model.
No, César.
Trade unions. They're a trade union. Okay.
Could you speak to the microphone for the people who?
Yes. Investment in new technology. This is a problematic. Toporowski's own attitude to this changed from seeing changes in technology. Toporowski always saw new technology as being embodied technology. That, in other words, that first there has to be a desire by business to invest. And once there's a desire to invest, then there will be a tendency for them to try and invest, use the latest technology. But just having an innovation in itself, according to Toporowski, didn't was not a sufficient stimulus to adopt new technology. In other words, to scrap old equipment and introduce new equipment. Actually, this gave rise to to an interesting controversy, because this was something that was picked up. Toporowski's attitude was picked up by Joseph Steindl in his book Maturity and Stagnation in American Capitalism. And he published it, putting forward Toporowski's own view on this, and then changed his mind. And this you can find if you get the monthly review edition of Steindl's Maturity and Stagnation in American Capitalism, came out in 1976. That has a preface it has a new introduction by Steindl, in which he explains how he came to change his mind. And it was the view that, to some extent, competition can force businesses to invest in new equipment. I remember, I think shortly after that period, I had a different take on this, and that is that what was happening was that businesses were taking their old tech. The problem with replacing old technology with new technology is if your sunk costs, if the money that you've sunk in building the old technology, if you haven't recovered that money yet from the cash flow. And I argued that this was actually what was giving rise to the technological backwardness in the developing countries. The developing countries were ostensibly becoming industrialized through collaborative ventures with multinational manufacturing companies. But what the multinational manufacturing companies were doing was they were transferring their old production lines.
Yeah. Held 1959.
Yeah, that's right. So this was certainly what the Japanese were doing and the British companies were doing in East Asia. So on this, I think yes, I think this is an alternative feature, but it creates problems for countries that are trying to industrialize. The problem of new technology is not resolved, and I think it won't be resolved as long as new technology is associated with private capital, and the problem that private capital has with excess capacity and the tendency to operate using excess capacity. And I guess this is the problem is I don't know Caldor's work that well, so I can't comment on it. In Kaletsky, the question of productivity, he saw it as a long-term issue, but he also saw it as being a feature that was problematic because of concentration. And this, yes, the increase in the degree of concentration certainly holds back, according to Kaletsky, it holds back productivity and investment in new technology. In terms of the profit share, the share of profits relative to wages, I think it doesn't increase, as I said at the end, it doesn't increase profits. If businesses, monopolists get more profit, it's at the expense of smaller businesses, and it may well be at the expense of wage revenue. So that would be the effect, but it wouldn't increase profits. The Cambridge Kaplan and the Cambridge controversies. This is something where I think has been it's been a source of major misunderstandings. I remember discussing this with Jeff Harcourt, and in general, my view is that this is not a long-term a feature of long-term development, as many people have interpreted it, as many people have interpreted Straffa, so that you have Dumenil and Levy, for example, who take the view that this is, or Marglin, Baduri and Marglin, who take this as being a long-term position. But what the Cambridge controversies exposed was an instantaneous position in capitalist production, and this is the same, and that was because that's what's in Straffa. So yes, I'll finish there.
Okay. Creo que ya no hay más. Le damos las gracias. Nos vemos mañana. Perfecto.
Hablamos al sí.
Thank you everyone in the Zoom room. Tomorrow, I hope you can join for the next session. A la gente del Zoom les agradecemos estar hasta hoy. Mañana tendremos la sesión a la misma hora, a las 10:30. The session tomorrow is going to be at the same time, 10:30.
No.